Welcome to the deep dive. You handed us the 2025 Cyber Threat Report, and, well, our mission is simple. We're going to cut through the noise, extract the crucial insights about the 2024 cybersecurity landscape that you really need to know.
Yeah, this report is pretty comprehensive, covers everything: attack trends, ransomware, attacker techniques, phishing, the works.
Exactly. And we want to go deeper than just a high-level summary, give you some actionable intelligence no matter your organization's size.
Right, because the details here, they really show how things are shifting, how attackers adapt. We'll pull out specific data, specific trends, so you get a real feel for what happened in 2024, and more importantly, what you should be bracing for.
Okay, let's get into it then. The big picture first.
Yeah.
The 2024 threat landscape. One huge finding, really striking, is that the sophistication gap between attacks on big companies and smaller businesses, it's basically gone.
That's a critical point. It seems attackers are standardizing their more advanced methods. They're bringing their A game to everyone now, not just the giant enterprises.
So even smaller shops need to think about threat intel, sophisticated monitoring. It's not just basic security anymore.
Precisely. Attackers have gotten really efficient at scaling these advanced tactics.
And speaking of tactics, the report really zeroes in on remote access Trojans, RATs. Apparently something like, over 3/4 of remote access incidents involved them?
Yeah, the numbers are high. Asyncrat, NetSupport, Jupiter. Those were the common ones.
And Jupiter, get this, it started as an info stealer. Now it's turning into a multi-stage backdoor.
Yeah, that's what's fascinating, the adaptability. InfoStealers evolving like that. It signals a worrying trend. Initial data theft breaches. Now they're being used for persistent access. Potentially much more damage down the line.
It's like a stepping stone.
Exactly. It's a real testament to this constant cyber arms race.
And it wasn't just RATs. Ransomware changed too in 2024. The report highlights this move away from just encryption, more towards data theft and extortion. A double whammy.
Groups like BNLalien, Ransom Hub, Akira, they're really leaning into that.
But why, though? Why the shift?
Well, it seems connected to better detection and recovery. If victims can restore from backups quickly, encryption alone is less effective for the attacker. But stealing the data first and threatening to leak it, that adds huge pressure, reputational damage, financial hits.
Oh, it makes total sense. It hits them where it really hurts, even if they can recover the files. Okay, what about living off the land techniques? LOL bins. The report mentions those are getting more sophisticated too.
Right, using legitimate tools, things already on the system, like the sysinternal suite.
So they're hiding in plain sight, basically.
Pretty much. It lets them blend in with normal admin activity. Much harder to detect.
So you need really good monitoring to spot the difference between legit use and, something bad.
Exactly. And maybe even removing tools you don't strictly need. Reducing that attack surface.
Then there's phishing. Always phishing. It took a turn for the trickier in 2024. We're seeing more QR code phishing, more image-based stuff trying to bypass filters.
And really convincing brand impersonation.
Yeah, and this blew me away. Malicious frameworks that personalize phishing emails using social media data.
Talk about targeted. It really shows the sophistication of the social engineering side. Attackers are always finding new ways to exploit trust. That personalization makes it so much more effective.
What can you even do against that? It really underlines the need for constant awareness training, I guess.
It really does. That human element is still so critical.
And if that wasn't enough, remote monitoring and management tools, RMMs, things like ConnectWise, Screen Connect, TeamViewer, they're being abused more.
Yeah, abused for initial access and also for moving laterally once they're inside. Likely.
Because those tools are often trusted, right? Whitelisted.
Exactly. That trust is what makes them so insidious when abused.
Yeah.
Attackers know it lets them operate stealthily.
So tighter controls on RMMs, MFA, specific monitoring, all crucial.
Definitely.
Okay, let's put some numbers on this. Figure 1 in the report, frequency of threats overall. InfoStealers top the list at 24%. Then malicious scripts, 22%. Malware, 17%.
Then RATs at 13%. Ransomware, 9.5%. RMM abuse, 6.5%.
And hacking tools and lateral movement, both around 4%.
What's interesting there is how high InfoStealers and scripts are. It really points to that initial access and info gathering being a primary goal, sort of reconnaissance before the main attack.
Like laying the groundwork.
Precisely.
Now, let's pivot a bit. How do these threats look across different industries? Your report says healthcare and education were hit hardest.
Yeah, combined, they accounted for, 38% of incidents. Huge chunk.
Then tech, manufacturing, government followed.
And each sector faces slightly different challenges. Healthcare, for example, often a mix of old and new systems, vulnerable to scripts, Java-based RATs.
And that ransomware shift to data theft must be particularly bad for them with patient data.
Absolutely. The sensitivity of that data makes the extortion threat very potent.
Okay, and the tech sector, what's unique there?
Lots of RMM abuse there, too.
Yeah.
Also, credential theft, targeting things like password managers, and, worryingly, using tech companies as a way into their clients. A supply chain angle.
Whoa! Using them as a launch pad.
Yeah. And attackers even bringing their own IP scanners. Shows planning, sophistication.
Right. Education seemed more focused on malicious scripts, RMM abuse disguised as updates.
And that Chrome loader info stealer popped up a lot there.
Probably exploiting stretched IT resources in schools and universities.
That seems likely. Large number of users, endpoints, often creates a wider, maybe less defended attack surface.
Makes sense. Government targets. Seeing more advanced stuff.
Yeah, alongside the usual info stealers in RA, you see tools like Cobalt, Strike, Bloodhound more often. Hints at maybe more sophisticated actors, potentially nation states in some cases. But LL bins are still used there too. Stealth works everywhere.
And finally, manufacturing.
High number of our raids, especially Asyncrat, TrickBot, net support, more varied scripting abuse, and malware disguised as things like Adobe components, plus Windows RDP abuse.
Disguised as Adobe, that's sneaky.
Very. And the goal there often seemed to be domain password theft, probably aiming for broader control, maybe operational systems.
Okay, let's talk more about ransomware specifically in 2024. We saw big names get disrupted, Lockbit, Dharma Crisis, Hive, Phobos.
Which is good news, obviously. Takedowns help. But it hasn't stopped ransomware. Instead, we're seeing smaller, maybe more agile affiliate networks pop up.
Like Ransom Hub and Iron Clinks, the report says they're offering higher payouts to affiliates.
Right. That fragmentation makes them harder to track, potentially more motivated because of those higher payouts. Could mean more aggressive tactics.
And we mentioned Bindly and shifting to data theft. That trend seems pretty solid now.
Definitely. And Ransom Hub, Lynx, Akira, those three accounted for over half, 54%, of ransomware incidents hitting smaller businesses.
Those are the names to watch then, especially if you're an SMB.
Absolutely. Their focus on smaller orgs might be perception of weaker defenses or just a volume play.
We also saw Black Suit or Royal emerge as an aggressive player.
Yeah, it just reinforces the point.
Right.
The ransomware scene is dynamic, constantly shifting, adapting.
Figures 10 and 12 in the report show this visually, the top operators, who's up, who's down since 2023. It's like a leaderboard.
And watching that leaderboard helps with threat intel, risk assessment, knowing who the active players are.
Now time to ransom. TTR. How fast they move from getting in to deploying the ransomware. The average was about 17 hours in 2024.
Which sounds fast, but some groups are way faster.
Yeah, Kira. The report pegs them at around 6 hours sometimes.
6 hours. That's an incredibly short window to detect and respond effectively.
What influences that speed? Initial access level, network complexity?
All of that. How easily they can escalate privileges, how complex the environment is. It varies. But that speed highlights the need for automated defenses.
And it wasn't just about speed. They looked at the number of actions before ransomware deployment. Average was 18.
Right. And interestingly, the extortion-focused groups, they tend to do more actions beforehand.
More reconnaissance, more data exfiltration.
Exactly. They need time to find and steal the valuable data before they drop the ransom demand. Encryption-focused groups might just go for speed.
Different playbooks. Figures 13, 14, 15 break this down group by group. Really shows their different operational rhythms.
Yeah, analyzing those patterns can help defenders spot attacks earlier, maybe intervene before the final encryption or leak.
Okay, let's shift to the attacker's toolbox. What are they actually using? The report stresses that specialized tools, admin tools, are still huge, more so than big hacking suites.
Things like Mimikatz for credential dumping, the CISO internal suite for, well, lots of things.
Yeah.
They're still incredibly effective.
So defenders need ways to spot the misuse of these common, often legitimate tools.
Absolutely. It's about behavior, not just the tool itself.
And we keep coming back to RATs. Dominant for remote access, 75% of incidents.
Asyncrat, net support RRT, that evolving Jupiter. They're constantly being refined.
Still a major challenge to detect, especially when disguised. Then RMM tools again. 17.3% of remote access was abuse of those. ConnectWise Screen Connect was the big one. Nearly 75% of that RMM abuse.
Yeah, and that campaign exploiting the Screen Connect vulnerabilities back in February. That was huge.
Remind us, what were those vulnerabilities? CVE 2024, 1709, and 1708.
That's right. They basically allowed attackers to bypass authentication, create admin accounts, and take control.
And the payload was often lockbit ransomware.
Yeah, a direct, severe consequence of not patching those critical tools quickly.
Figures 16 and 19 visualize the remote access methods, the top abuse tools. Worth checking which ones you use.
Understanding those trends helps prioritize defenses. Focus controls on the tools you know are hot targets.
The report also mentioned traditional exploits, Screen Connect again, Crush FTP, Proxy Shell for Exchange.
Right. While maybe not as dominant as RMM abuse or phishing for initial access these days, vulnerability exploitation is still very much a thing.
Especially if patching isn't consistent.
Exactly. Patch management remains absolutely fundamental.
Okay, let's use the IMITRE, ATT, and CK framework now. The report uses it to categorize tactics. It focuses on execution, persistence, privilege elevation, defense evasion, credential access, lateral movement, kind of the attacker lifecycle.
It's a great way to break down complex attacks into understandable stages and techniques.
And interestingly, 65.5% of detections happen during the execution phase.
Which suggests EDR tools are pretty good at catching malicious code running.
But attackers know this, so they're working hard on the other phases, right? Evasion, persistence.
Precisely. That's why looking at the whole chain is crucial.
Under scripting abuse, PowerShell was king. 45% of scripting activity.
No surprise there. It's powerful, it's built into Windows, makes a prime target for abuse.
Followed by JavaScript and batch files.
So, limiting PowerShell where possible, logging its activity, that's key.
For persistence, how attackers stick around. Surprisingly, old methods are still popular. Registry run keys, auto runs.
Yeah, nearly half of persistence techniques involve those. They're well known, but often effective because monitoring might be lax.
If it ain't broke for the attacker.
Pretty much. Highlights a gap in basic hygiene sometimes.
Credential access. Mimikat's still big, about 27%, but also LOL bins being used stealthily.
Right, using things like procdump or ntdsutil to dump credentials without dropping a known tool like Mimikat's.
Requires that behavioral analysis, again, not just signatures.
Exactly.
Defense evasion. How they hide. File name obfuscation, messing with the registry.
Trying to blend in, trying to trick security tools. It's that constant cat and mouse game.
And security bypasses. The report mentions things like bypassing user account control, UAC, but also direct EDR tampering.
EDR tampering is a big concern. Attackers actively trying to disable the main defense saw a peak in that around July.
And this bring your own vulnerable driver BYOVD thing for privilege elevation.
Yeah, that's pretty sophisticated. Exploiting flaws in legitimate signed drivers to get kernel-level access. Very hard to detect.
Wow. Okay. Figures 26 to 37 really map all this out in detail, technique by technique within the ATT and CK phases. Super useful for defenders.
Invaluable insights there. Helps you tailor defenses against the most common real-world tactics.
All right, let's look at hands-on keyboard activity, HOK. This means a human attacker is actively involved, right? Not just automated malware.
Generally, yes. It often indicates a more targeted interactive intrusion.
And the report saw peaks in HOK activity in February, June, July, November 2024.
Those peaks likely line up with specific campaigns or periods where attackers had established footholds and were actively exploring.
And what were they doing during this hands-on time?
Top activities were domain enumeration, mapping out the network lateral movement, and executing specific tools.
So, learning the environment, spreading out, achieving their goals, standard playbook once they're in.
Exactly. Detecting that kind of activity early is critical to limiting the damage.
What about when they were doing this, the operational timeframes?
Mostly between 12:20:00 UTC and 20:00 UTC.
Which lines up with U.S. East Coast business hours? Why then? Trying to blend in.
Could be. Hiding amongst legitimate traffic. Or maybe they're actively interacting based on when targets are online.
Interesting. So maybe ramp up monitoring during those hours, but don't rely on it.
Right. Continuous monitoring is still essential. Sophisticated attackers can work anytime.
Figures 38 to 41 break down that HOK activity further, months, types of actions, good granular data.
Helps refine that understanding of attacker behavior patterns.
Okay, next up, identity threats. Big focus on Microsoft 365 environments, seems like.
Unsurprisingly, given its dominance. Identities are the new perimeter, as they say.
Attacks are getting more common, more sophisticated. New detection methods are popping up too.
Compromising an identity, an M365 account, gives attackers so much access. Email, files.
One specific tactic highlighted, inbox rule modifications. attackers setting rules to hide emails.
Yeah, moving emails automatically to obscure folders like the RSS feeds folder was common.
That's sneaky. Siphoning off info without the user noticing immediately.
It's a persistence and data exfiltration technique. Need to audit those rules.
Then, token theft. Stealing authentication tokens to bypass logins, even MFA.
Right, it's more advanced. But attackers sometimes slip up the report notes. OS mismatches are a common way this gets detected.
So they steal a token from a Windows machine, but try to use it from a Linux box, and that flags it.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Or VPN mismatches, browser mismatches.
Yeah.
Inconsistencies give them away.
And credential theft is similar, but maybe slightly different detection triggers. Still fundamental, though.
Still a cornerstone. Phishing for creds, brute force. Basic, but effective. Monitoring suspicious logins is key.
Finally, under identity, abusing VPN and proxy services to hide their tracks.
NordVPN, SurfEasy, ExpressVPN were the most abused, according to the report.
Makes attribution harder, gets around geo-blocking.
Exactly. Knowing the popular services helps refine threat intel, maybe block known malicious exit nodes.
Figures 42 to 46 dive deeper into all this ITDR identity threat detection and response data. Lots to unpack there.
Yeah, really useful data on specific identity threats and attacker methods.
Okay, let's wrap up with phishing activity in 2024. Still a massive issue. The analysis found 285 unique attack groups just from the reported emails they looked at.
The scale is just huge,
Yeah.
and it keeps evolving.
What were the big themes? E-signature impersonation was number one, like fake DocuSign or Adobe emails.
Yeah, nearly 29%. People expect those emails makes them effective lures.
Then image-based content, trying to hide malicious links or text in images.
Almost 24% helps bypass text scanners.
QR codes, 8%. The report thinks that's going to grow.
Makes sense. Easy to scan on a phone, maybe fewer protections there.
Also, living off trusted sites, using links to legit services like Dropbox to host bad stuff.
Right, abusing trusted domains, plus voicemail lures, fake email reply chains, getting creative.
And the most impersonated brand, Microsoft, by a long shot, nearly 40%.
Again, no surprise given M365 usage. Attackers go where the users are. Need extra vigilance on anything Microsoft branded.
Figures 47 and 48 show these themes and brands visually. Good stuff for awareness training.
Definitely. Concrete examples really help users spot these things.
Okay, so let's try and summarize this deep dive into the 2024 landscape via the 2025 Cyber Threat Report. Key takeaways for me. That sophistication gap closing, ransomware shifting hard to data theft, the constant abuse of legitimate tools like RMMs and LOL bins.
And the increasing cleverness in phishing and identity attacks, it's relentless.
Which means proactive defenses, patching, better monitoring, and ongoing user training aren't just nice-to-haves anymore.
They're fundamental necessities. Absolutely critical. And a huge thanks here to our sponsor, www.CISOmarketplace.com, for supporting this discussion.
Yes, thank you to www.CISOmarketplace.com. So that brings us to our final thought for you. Considering this big shift in ransomware towards data theft over just encrypting files, what new strategies, maybe even unconventional ones, should organizations prioritize to really protect their sensitive information in the years ahead?
That's the big question, isn't it? Something to really mull over.
Definitely food for thought. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.